He grabbed the wrench and took apart a wheelchair that cost more than his house. Not because he was asked, not because he was paid, because something was wrong, and no one else was willing to say it out loud. That single act in a half-broken garage at 2 a.m. was either the bravest thing Ray Calloway had ever done, or the last. By sunrise, a convoy of black luxury cars had surrounded his shop, and inside one of them sat the most powerful man in the state, a billionaire who didn't ask questions before making problems disappear. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss a single part of this one. The first car pulled up at 5:47 in the morning. Ray Calloway heard it before he saw it. The low, expensive hum of an engine that had never once strained in its life. He was on his back, under a '98 Chevy pickup, socket wrench in hand, grease up to his elbows, when the sound made him go still. Then came the second car. Then the third. He rolled out from under the truck slowly, blinking against the pale morning light, bleeding through the garage door. 3 black SUVs, no, 4, were lined up in the parking lot of Calloway's Auto and Repair, a place that had 12 parking spaces, 2 broken lights, and a sign out front where the letter C had fallen off 18 months ago and never been replaced. Ray stood up. He was 44 years old, 6 feet tall, with hands that had been calloused since he was 17, and eyes that had learned a long time ago not to show fear, even when fear was exactly what he felt. He felt it now. The lead car's door opened. A man in a black suit stepped out. Not the driver, not security. An assistant. The kind of man who existed purely to deliver messages on behalf of someone who didn't deliver their own. Mr. Calloway. The assistant's voice was flat, rehearsed. Mr. Harlan Voss would like a word. Ray didn't move. He's not asking, the assistant added, almost apologetically. The rear door of the second SUV opened. Harlan Voss stepped out. Ray had seen the man's face before, on the cover of a business magazine in the waiting room of a doctor's office 3 years ago. The same appointment where he'd learned his daughter Emma had a moderate hearing loss in her left ear, and that the hearing aids weren't going to be cheap. Voss had been photographed mid-laugh, teeth white, suit perfect, the kind of man who looked like he'd been assembled by engineers rather than born. In person, he was different, taller, quieter. The laugh was gone. What remained was something harder, a stillness that powerful men develop when they've spent enough years in rooms where everyone around them was afraid. He walked toward Ray without hurrying. Ray held his wrench. It wasn't a threat. It was just where his hand was. But he didn't put it down. Voss stopped 5 feet away. He looked at Ray for a long moment. The grease, the worn-out boots, the garage behind him with its peeling paint and flickering fluorescent light. And his expression didn't change. "You touched my daughter's chair," Voss said. Not a question. "I did," Ray said. Silence. Somewhere behind Voss, one of the SUV doors opened, and a small sound floated out. A soft, mechanical hum. A motorized wheelchair, moving carefully across the cracked asphalt. Ray didn't look away from Voss. "Do you know what that chair costs?" Voss asked. "About $87,000, Ray said, give or take. That got a reaction. Small, but real. Voss's eyes narrowed slightly. "You looked it up." "I didn't have to. I know the components. The custom titanium frame, the adaptive seating system, the pressure redistribution cushion. Probably the Permobil M3 base with a full custom build-out."
"I've worked on chairs before." Ray paused.
Not chairs that cost that much. But I know what goes into them. Voss studied him. Then you know it was designed by a team of specialists. 3 of the top mobility engineers in the country. I know. You know it was inspected and certified before delivery. I know that too. So tell me, Voss said, and his voice dropped, just slightly, to the kind of register that probably made boardrooms go quiet. Why you thought a mechanic in a failing garage in rural Virginia had anything useful to add. Ray finally looked, just for a moment, past Voss's shoulder. The wheelchair had stopped near the front of the lead SUV. In it sat a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. She had her father's dark eyes, but not his coldness. She was watching Ray with an expression he recognized immediately. Hope. Guarded, fragile, already half prepared to be disappointed, but hope. He looked back at Voss. Because she's been in pain, Ray said, and nobody's told her the truth about why. 14 hours earlier, Ray Calloway had not been thinking about billionaires. He'd been thinking about whether he could make rent. The garage had been his father's. Before that, his grandfather's. 3 generations of Calloways who believed that if you did honest work and kept your word, the world would treat you fair. Ray had spent 30 years learning, slowly and painfully, that the world didn't operate that way. He had a daughter, Sophie, who was 9 years old and fierce, and the best thing in his life by an enormous margin. Her mother had left when Sophie was 3. Not dramatically, not with a fight. Just a conversation, a suitcase, and a door closing. Ray had never blamed her. He'd blamed himself for a long time instead. And then, eventually, he'd stopped blaming anyone and just gotten on with it. Getting on with it meant early mornings and late nights. It meant Sophie doing homework on the waiting room couch while he finished up jobs. It meant macaroni and cheese on nights when the books didn't balance, which was most nights lately. The economy had not been kind to small auto shops. The newer cars were all computers now. Half of them he couldn't even diagnose without proprietary software he couldn't afford. His regulars were aging out, driving less, or getting their oil changes at the chain places where you pulled in and pulled out in 20 minutes. Calloway's was still standing, but only barely. He'd been about to close up at 6 in the evening when the black SUV pulled in. Not 4 of them, just one. The driver was a big man with a crew cut who got out, looked around the garage with the calm, assessing eyes of someone paid to assess things and said, "We have a mechanical issue. Small one. My employer would like it looked at tonight." Ray wiped his hands on a rag. "What's the issue?" "One of the support mechanisms on a mobility device. It's making a noise." Ray raised an eyebrow. "A wheelchair?" "A mobility chair," the driver corrected, as if the distinction mattered. "I work on cars." "We're aware." The driver held out a card. It had a number on it and nothing else. "My employer will compensate you well." Ray looked at the card. Then he looked at his empty garage. Then he said, "Bring it in." He didn't meet Harlan Voss right away. The chair came in first, pushed carefully by the driver and a second man who materialized from the back of the SUV. It was, even to Ray's untrained eye, an extraordinary piece of equipment. The kind of technology that belonged in a hospital or a lab, not in a place that smelled like motor oil and had a cracked concrete floor. He crouched down to look at it, and that's when he first noticed. The noise was there, a faint, intermittent clicking from the left rear wheel assembly. Probably what they brought it in for. Easy enough to find. Some kind of micro-vibration in the hub, debris, or a minor misalignment. But as he ran his eyes over the rest of the chair, not touching it yet, just looking, something else started pulling at his attention. He'd worked on mobility equipment twice in his life. Both times, years ago, for customers who couldn't afford the specialist shops. He'd learned enough to be cautious and enough to recognize when something wasn't right. The seat adjustment was off. Not obviously, not in a way you'd catch at a glance, but the lateral tilt mechanism, the part that controlled the side-to-side angle of the seating surface, had been set and locked at a position that was almost right. Almost. Just enough off that it would create a constant, low-grade pressure imbalance. Not immediately painful, not dangerous on its own, but cumulative. Day after day, hour after hour, the body compensating, the spine adjusting, the muscles quietly fighting a battle they'd never be told they were fighting. Ray straightened up. He looked at the two men standing by the SUV. How long has she been using this chair? The driver blinked. Excuse me? The person who uses this chair. How long? A pause. About 14 months. Ray looked back at the chair. 14 months. I need to speak with whoever brought this in, he said. Harlan Voss had been on a phone call for the last 40 minutes, pacing the parking lot outside, and he did not look pleased to be interrupted. He was a man who radiated the energy of someone who had not been interrupted in a very long time. But something in the way Ray stood, steady, no apology, not trying to smooth anything over, made him end the call. What? Voss said. The clicking noise in the wheel assembly. I can fix that in about 20 minutes, Ray said. That's not the issue. Voss stared at him. What do you mean that's not the issue? That's why we're here. I know, but I was looking at the chair and I noticed... You were looking at it. Voss's voice was careful, in a way that was more dangerous than being loud. You weren't asked to look at it. You were asked to fix a noise. Sir, the lateral tilt on the seating system is set wrong. It's been set wrong since it was built, or since it was delivered. I can't tell which. But whoever is sitting in that chair every day has been experiencing a constant, low-grade postural stress that... Stop. Voss held up one hand. Are you telling me that a team of 3 certified mobility engineers designed a chair incorrectly? I'm telling you what I see. You're a car mechanic. I'm a mechanic who's looking at the chair right now, Ray said, and I'm telling you what I see. The two men looked at each other across the parking lot. Voss's jaw tightened. My daughter's specialists have examined that chair 4 times. Her physical therapist has examined her. Her physician has examined her. Every one of them has told me the chair is perfect, and that any discomfort she experiences is part of her underlying condition, not the chair. Ray said nothing. You're suggesting all of them are wrong, Voss said flatly. I'm suggesting the tilt setting is wrong, Ray said. I could be wrong about everything else. I'm not wrong about that. Silence. Something moved across Voss's face. Something that came and went so fast you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. Not anger. Something more complicated. Something that looked, for just a fraction of a second, like the face of a father who had watched his child in pain for 14 months and been told, over and over, that there was nothing more to be done. Then it was gone. Fix the noise, Voss said quietly. Nothing else. Don't touch anything else. And when you're done, you'll be paid and we'll leave. He turned and walked back toward the SUV. Ray stood in the parking lot, wrench in hand. He fixed the noise. It took 19 minutes. He handed the invoice to the driver, pocketed the cash, more than he charged, but he didn't say anything about that, and watched the black SUV pull out of the lot. He went inside, locked up, and tried to go home. He made it about halfway across the parking lot before he stopped. He went back inside. He didn't fully understand why. There were 100 logical reasons not to. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his place. He'd been told clearly to leave it alone. And the last thing he needed was trouble with a man like Harlan Voss. He had rent to make. He had Sophie to feed. He had enough of his own problems without picking up someone else's. But he kept thinking about that tilt angle. He knew what it would do to a body over time. He knew it the same way he knew the sound of an engine that was running just slightly too hot. Not broken yet, not seizing, but quietly accumulating damage with every single mile. He sat down on the floor of his garage, next to the chair that had been left while the SUV was supposedly coming back to pick it up the next morning. Some miscommunication, the driver had said. They'd return by 6 a.m., and he looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at the tool wall. Then he looked back at the chair. "I'm going to regret this," he said out loud, to no one. He pulled on his work gloves and got to work. He didn't dismantle it. Not yet. First, he measured. He had a digital angle gauge he used for brake jobs and suspension work, accurate to 1/10 of a degree. He ran it across the seating surface 3 times, from 3 different reference points, and wrote down the numbers on a piece of shop paper. Then he pulled out his phone and spent 40 minutes reading everything he could find about the Permobil M3 seating system and its certified lateral tilt specifications. When he found the manufacturer's recommended angle range, he set the phone down. He'd been right. The chair was off by 4 degrees. In the world of fine machinery, 4 degrees was enormous. In the world of human posture, 4 degrees sustained over 14 months meant chronic strain in the lumbar region and the left hip flexor. It meant the body constantly, invisibly fighting to stay upright. It meant waking up every morning already exhausted from work the body had done in its sleep. It meant pain. Ray sat back on his heels. He picked up his phone and started to put it away, and that's when he felt it under his fingers. Something at the back of the seating cushion, wedged into the crease between the cushion and the frame. A piece of paper, folded small, almost like it had been hidden there deliberately. He unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Someone who thought about each letter before they wrote it. Like they wanted to make sure it was legible. Like they wanted to make sure whoever found it could read it clearly. 4 words. "Someone please help. It hurts." Ray stared at the note for a very long time. Then he stood up, walked to the tool wall, and took down everything he was going to need. He worked through the night. He'd done careful disassembly before. Old carburetors, antique engines that you couldn't just muscle through, that required patience and documentation and the understanding that every single piece had a place it came from and needed to go back to. He laid out every component in order, labeled in his handwriting, photographed on his phone. He found 4 other problems besides the tilt. Not catastrophic, not things that would make a specialist say immediately, "This is dangerous," but the kind of things that accumulate. A headrest adjustment locked 3 millimeters too far forward. A footrest positioned to subtly externally rotate the left ankle during every push cycle. Minor things. The kind of things that, taken alone, you might dismiss. Taken together, over 14 months, they told a story. This chair had been built to spec. Every component was exactly where someone had told someone it should be. But the person who'd signed off on the spec had been working from data, from measurements and charts and clinical assessments, without ever, Ray suspected, spending more than a few minutes in the presence of the girl who was going to live in this chair every single day. He rebuilt it from the numbers, not from instinct alone. He wasn't arrogant enough to trust only instinct on something like this. He worked from the manufacturer's recommended settings, from what he'd read, from careful measurement and remeasurement. He adjusted the tilt. He corrected the headrest. He repositioned the footrests. At 3 a.m., his hands started shaking from fatigue. He sat down on the floor with his back against the workbench and ate the last of a bag of pretzels he found in his jacket pocket. and drank cold coffee from a thermos. Sophie would be at school in 5 hours. He was supposed to drive her. He looked at the rebuilt chair. He thought about the note. "Someone please help. It hurts." He got back up. At 5:15 a.m., he was done. He rolled the chair out to the center of the garage floor and looked at it under the fluorescent light. It looked the same. That was either a good thing or a terrible thing. He wouldn't know which until someone sat in it. He cleaned his hands. He sat down on the concrete floor and let the exhaustion hit him all at once, like a wave he'd been holding back for hours. He'd either just done something that mattered, or he'd destroyed an $87,000 piece of equipment belonging to a man who could end him without blinking. And the police would probably be here by breakfast. He closed his eyes. He heard the cars arrive. He was still sitting on the floor when the garage door opened. He didn't scramble up. He stood slowly, the way a man who has nothing left to hide stands up. He walked out into the pale morning light and looked at the 4 black SUVs, and he held his wrench, not as a weapon, not as armor, but just because it was in his hand, and putting it down felt like giving something up. Harlan Voss walked toward him, and Ray Calloway looked that man in the eye and said, "I know what you told me. I know what I was supposed to do. I did it anyway." Voss stopped walking. "She wrote a note," Ray said. "It was in the cushion. I found it at midnight. 4 words. I've got it inside if you want to see it." He paused. "I rebuilt the chair. I didn't guess. I measured everything against manufacturer spec. I documented every step. It's all on my phone. 4 degrees off on the lateral tilt, 14 months of cumulative postural damage, 4 secondary alignment errors." He looked at Voss steadily. "I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll pay for every penny of damage. I don't have it, but I'll figure it out. But I don't think I'm wrong." Voss hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. His face was completely, absolutely unreadable. Behind him, the rear door of the second SUV opened, and the wheelchair came out. The wheelchair rolled out slowly, guided by the same driver who'd brought it in the night before. And behind it, stepping down carefully from the SUV with one hand gripping the door frame, was the girl. Ray hadn't gotten a good look at her the night before. She'd stayed in the car while the men handled the logistics, the way rich people's children sometimes stayed invisible during business, present but not participating, existing in the margins of their parents' transactions. She was 16, maybe 17. Dark hair pulled back. She had her father's jaw, that same set, that same quiet tension. But her eyes were different. Where Voss's eyes were measuring, calculating, always a half second ahead of whatever was happening, hers were just watching, taking things in without deciding yet what to do with them. She looked at the chair. Then she looked at Ray. "You're the one who took it apart," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact she was checking. "I am," Ray said. "Dad said you weren't supposed to." "He's right. I wasn't." She studied him for a moment. There was something in that look. Something older than 16. The kind of careful assessment you develop when you've spent years learning that most people who say they're going to help you don't actually follow through. "Why did you?" she asked. Ray glanced at Voss, who was standing perfectly still, arms crossed, watching this exchange with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing, and then looked back at the girl. "I found something in the cushion," he said. "Something you left there." A beat of silence. Her face changed. It was subtle, just a slight parting of the lips, a quick intake of breath, but it changed. The careful, guarded look cracked open just slightly, the way a door opens an inch before someone decides whether to open it all the way. "You read it," she said. "I did." "And that's why you—" She stopped, looked at the chair, then back at him. "You stayed up all night because of a note." "I stayed up all night because the note confirmed what I already suspected," Ray said. "But yes, because of the note." Harlan Voss uncrossed his arms. "Mia." His voice was quiet, but it had weight. "You don't have to." "I want to try it," she said, and there was something in the way she said it. Not defiant exactly, but certain. The voice of someone who had been through enough waiting rooms and second opinions and carefully managed disappointments that she had learned to just say plainly what she wanted before someone found a reason to delay it. She looked at Ray. "Is it safe?" "I believe it is," Ray said. "I documented everything I changed. You can have your father's engineers review it before you—" "Is it safe?" she repeated. Not a question the second time. A test. Ray looked at her directly. "Yes." She nodded once. "Okay." The driver moved to help her transfer, and she accepted that with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned long ago how to let people help without letting them take over. She lowered herself into the chair slowly, adjusted her position, settled her hands on the armrests. Everybody went still. Voss hadn't moved. The two assistants hadn't moved. The driver stood 2 feet away with his hands slightly out, ready to react, the way people stood around things they were afraid of breaking. Ray watched her face. For a long moment, nothing happened. She sat. She shifted her weight slightly to the left, then the right. She pressed her back against the lumbar support. Her eyes were focused on something internal. She was listening to her own body, the way you listen for a sound you've been told might not be there. Then her hands tightened on the armrests. Not in pain, in something else. "It's different," she said quietly. Ray didn't say anything. "It's—" She shook her head, like she didn't have the word for it. She pushed forward 3 feet, turned, came back. "The left side, it's not pulling anymore." She looked up at Ray, and her voice had gone very small. "It's not pulling." "The lateral tilt was off by 4 degrees, Ray said. "Your body's been fighting to compensate for it every single day for over a year. It probably felt like fatigue, like your condition was getting worse." Something crossed her face that Ray recognized because he'd seen it on Sophie once. The day Sophie came home from school crying because a teacher had finally explained to her why reading had always been so hard. That it wasn't because she was dumb, that there was a name for it, that it wasn't her fault. That same look, that combination of relief and grief that only arrives when you learn that the struggle you'd blamed yourself for had a reason, and the reason wasn't you. "Everyone said the pain was because of—" Mia started and then stopped. Her jaw tightened. "They said it was because of my spine, because of my condition. They said it was just something I'd have to manage." "I know," Ray said. 14 months, she said. "I know." She looked down at her hands on the armrests, and Ray watched something move through her. A wave of something complicated. The kind of emotion that has too many ingredients to name simply. It moved through her, and then she got very still, and she pressed her lips together, and she didn't cry. She was too controlled for that, or maybe too practiced. But her eyes went bright in a way that was unmistakable. Behind her, Harlan Voss had stopped looking like the most powerful man in the parking lot. He just looked like a father. He took 2 steps forward. He stood beside his daughter's chair, and he put one hand on her shoulder. Careful, the way people touch things they're terrified of breaking. And he looked at Ray, and for the first time since he'd stepped out of that SUV, Harlan Voss had absolutely nothing to say. Ray gave him a moment, Then he reached into his jacket pocket and held out the folded piece of paper. Voss took it. He looked at it for a long time without opening it. Then he unfolded it and read the 4 words, and something in his face, something that had been hard and controlled and armored for a very long time, simply broke. He folded it back up, put it in his own pocket, cleared his throat once. "How much do I owe you?" he said. His voice was rougher than it had been. "Nothing," Ray said. "The job from last night's already paid." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know what you're asking. The answer is still nothing." Voss looked at him. It wasn't the look he'd arrived with, the assessing, territorial look of a man deciding how much of a problem you were going to be. It was something else, something Ray didn't have a clean word for, like the man was trying to recalibrate a measurement he'd been confident about. "You could have ignored it," Voss said. "Yeah?" "You could have fixed the noise and gone home." "Yeah?" "Why didn't you?" Ray was quiet for a moment. He looked at Mia, who was running her hand along the armrest, quietly exploring the feel of something that had been adjusted to actually fit her. Then he looked back at Voss. "I've got a daughter," he said. 9 years old. There've been a few times, not many, but a few, where somebody could have looked the other way and didn't. A teacher who noticed she was struggling. A doctor who ran an extra test he wasn't strictly required to run. He paused. People don't have to do that. There's usually no reason to, besides just thinking it matters. I try to be that kind of person when I get the chance. He shrugged, a little self-conscious. I don't always manage it. But last night I had the chance, and the information, and the time, so... Voss didn't say anything right away. He was looking at Ray with that recalibrating expression, and Ray had the distinct feeling of being seen by someone who was very good at seeing people, and was perhaps not entirely comfortable with what he was finding. "The chair," Voss said finally. "It needs to be inspected by my engineers. You understand that?" "Absolutely. I've got photos of every step, measurements, before and after. It's all documented. You send whoever you want, and I'll walk them through every single thing I did." Ray met his eyes. "I didn't guess. I measured." "I believe you," Voss said. And then, like he was slightly surprised by his own words, "I believe you." It was Mia who broke the tension. "Can I drive?" she asked, and there was something different in her voice now. Lighter, like a window that had been painted shut for years and was finally cracked open an inch. "I just want to go to the end of the parking lot and back. Is that okay?" Voss looked at her. The hardness in his face was completely gone now. He looked tired and raw, and more human than Ray suspected he usually allowed himself to look. "Yeah, baby," he said quietly. "Go ahead." She pushed forward. The chair moved smoothly, quietly, without the clicking noise, without the pull. She went to the end of the parking lot and turned in a slow circle and came back. And her face during those 30 seconds was the face of someone doing something ordinary that had never, until right now, felt ordinary. She stopped in front of them. "No pain," she said, and her voice was very careful, like she was handling the words gently because she wasn't sure yet if she was allowed to trust them. Ray nodded. "You should know," she said, looking at him, "that I've had 8 specialists in the last year tell me the chair was fine. 8. She let that sit for a moment. "You're a car mechanic." "I am," Ray agreed. "That's either really funny or really depressing," she said. "Probably both," Ray said. She almost smiled. It came and went fast, more a ghost of one than the real thing, but it was there. Voss put his hand on her shoulder again. He looked at Ray over the top of her head. "I owe you," he said. Simple. No qualifier. "You don't," Ray said. "I do." And the way he said it left very little room for argument. It wasn't a social nicety. It was a statement of intent from a man who said exactly what he meant and then followed through on it. Ray let it go. The convoy stayed another 20 minutes, while Voss made a call and his engineers were briefed on the situation. There was a terse conversation on speakerphone in which several certified specialists were informed that a mechanic in rural Virginia had identified errors they had collectively missed. And the silence on that call was the particular kind of silence that happens when professionals discover they've been wrong in public. Ray stayed out of it. He sat on the step inside his garage door and drank cold coffee and let Voss handle his people. Mia rolled over at some point and positioned her chair next to where he was sitting. She didn't say anything for a minute, just sat.
"Does it hurt somewhere else?" Ray asked. "Anywhere the chair hits differently now?" She considered. "The left armrest is a little high. Not much. I can adjust that in about 4 minutes if you want." "You'd have to touch the chair again," she said.
"I would."
"My father just spent 20 minutes on the phone, managing the fallout from the last time you did that."
"I know." She glanced toward Voss, who was still on the far side of the parking lot, back turned, talking fast and quiet into his phone. Then she looked at Ray. "Do it," she said. He got his tools. He adjusted the armrest in 3.5 minutes, not 4. When he straightened up, she tested it, pressed her elbow down, shifted her weight, nodded once. "Better," she said. "Good." "Thank you." She said it plainly, without the emotional weight that had been in her voice before.
Not because she felt less. Ray thought she probably felt more. But because she was the kind of person who got quieter when things mattered most. He recognized that. He was the same way. "You're welcome," he said. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She looked at him directly. "Why is this place so run down?" Ray blinked. He'd expected something else. "Excuse me?" "Your garage. The sign's missing a letter. One of your bay lights is out. The parking lot's cracked." She wasn't being cruel. She was just observing. The daughter of a businessman, Ray thought, learning to read operations the same way her father did. "You clearly know what you're doing. You found in one night what 8 specialists missed in a year. So why is this place falling apart?" Ray finished. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I was going to say struggling." Ray leaned back against the doorframe. "Because knowing what you're doing and having the resources to do it properly are 2 different things," he said. "I know engines. I know mechanical systems. I don't know marketing or business development or how to compete with a chain shop that has a $40 million advertising budget." He paused. "I've kept it running because my grandfather built it and my father ran it. And there are people in this town who've been bringing their cars here for 30 years. And I'm not going to close the door on them. But..." He gestured vaguely at the lot, the sign, the flickering light. "Yeah, struggling's the word." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father built his first company in a room smaller than this garage. He's told me that story about 100 times." She looked at the building. "I don't think he remembers what that felt like. What it's like to know exactly what you're doing and not have anything to do it with." Ray looked at her. "You remember it for him?" She considered the question seriously, the way teenagers rarely do. "Someone has to," she said. Voss finished his call and came back across the parking lot. His face had the post-difficult conversation look of a man who'd said what needed to be said and was now done with it. He looked at his daughter. He looked at Ray. He took in the tools on the ground and the slightly adjusted armrest angle. "You fix something else," he said. Armrest was a little high. Voss looked at the ceiling briefly, in the way of a man deciding not to say what he'd been about to say. "Is there anything else wrong with it?" "Not that I found.
But I'd still have your engineers go through everything I did. Fresh eyes. They'll be here tomorrow morning. He paused. I'd like you to be here when they come. Ray raised an eyebrow. You want me to explain myself to the team that built it? I want you to walk them through your methodology. Yes. Voss said it without apology. They missed something. I'd like to understand how you caught it. So would they, if they're worth what I pay them. Ray thought about that. It was an unusual thing to be asked. He wasn't sure if it was a test, or an olive branch, or something else entirely. With a man like Voss, it was probably all three at once. All right, he said. 8 o'clock. I'll be here. Voss nodded. He turned to his daughter. We should go. You have your appointment at 11. Mia looked at Ray one more time. That careful, honest look. Then she said, The thing about the pain, I thought it was just how things were going to be. I thought I was going to have to get used to it. She said it quietly, not with drama. Just as a fact she was putting down somewhere, setting it aside. That's a hard thing to find out wasn't true. I know, Ray said. Good hard or bad hard? He thought about it honestly. Both, he said. Good hard. Mostly good. She nodded, like that was the answer she needed to hear. She started her chair toward the SUV. Voss walked beside her. At the car door, he turned back one more time. Calloway, he said. Yeah. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. He held Ray's gaze for a moment. And don't undersell yourself to my engineers. Then he got in the car. Ray stood in his parking lot and watched the convoy pull out. 4 black SUVs. A whole world of money and power and complicated grief. And then they were gone, and it was just him and the cracked asphalt and the sign with the missing letter and the fluorescent light that needed replacing. He went inside, sat down on the floor. His back ached from the night's work, and his eyes were burning from no sleep. And he had to pick Sophie up from school in 6 hours. He sat there in the quiet of his garage and thought about a girl who had hidden a note in her wheelchair cushion because she had run out of people to ask. Then he got up, found his phone, and called his sister to ask if she could do the school pickup, because he needed to sleep for 4 hours before the most important professional conversation of his life. He slept 4 hours and 12 minutes, which he knew because he checked his phone the moment his eyes opened, and the first thing he felt was the specific, hollow exhaustion of a man who slept just long enough to understand how tired he actually was. His sister Karen had texted back a thumbs up about Sophie's pickup, and then 3 question marks when he hadn't responded, and then finally, "What did you do this time?" He sent back a voice memo that was mostly him saying he'd explain later, and yes, he was fine, and no, he hadn't done anything illegal. Probably. He showered, changed, made coffee that was too strong because he miscounted scoops, and drove back to the garage at 7:45. 3 cars were already in the lot. Not SUVs this time, a sedan and 2 standard rentals. The kind of cars people drove when they were trying not to announce themselves. Ray pulled up, got out, and recognized one of the men standing by the garage door from a profile photo he'd found the night before during his research. Dr. Elliot Marsh, lead designer of the adaptive seating system used in the Permobil custom build. 50-something, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of posture that came from decades of leaning over drafting tables. He had a tablet under his arm and the expression of a man who had been told he made a mistake and was here to determine whether that was actually true. The other 2 Ray didn't recognize. Both younger, both with the tightly controlled faces of people who worked for someone important and were very aware of that fact at all times. "Mr. Calloway," Marsh said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, professional. Whatever he was feeling, he decided to be civil about it. I'm Elliot Marsh. We spoke briefly by phone last night.
We did, Ray said. Come on in. He unlocked the garage, and they filed in. The chair was still where Ray had left it, in the center of the floor, under the main light. Marsh went straight to it, like a doctor entering a room where a patient was waiting. He crouched down and began his assessment without preamble. Ray stood back and let him work. For the first 5 minutes, nobody spoke. Marsh moved methodically, the same way Ray had moved, the same systematic covering of ground, though with different tools and different reference points. He pulled out a digital level. He measured. He made small sounds that were neither approval nor condemnation, just the sounds of a man processing data. Then he sat back on his heels. 4.2 degrees, he said. He wasn't talking to Ray specifically. He was talking to the number in front of him, working through it. We specified 2.8. The lock mechanism held at. He turned the chair slightly, examined the lateral tilt actuator. The locking pin seated wrong on the actuator arm. The calibration passed because the sensor reads from the arm position, not the actual surface angle. He was quiet for a moment. If the pin was ever at correct position and then shifted during shipping or installation, she would have shown fine on the initial assessment, Ray said. The system would have reported correct settings because the sensor was showing correct arm position. The angle would have been off from day one, but nobody would have caught it unless they measured the surface directly. Marsh looked at him. That's right. It's the kind of thing that passes because everyone trusts the readout, Ray said, not unkindly. And there's no reason not to trust it, unless you've got a reason to double-check with an independent measurement. Which you did. I had an angle gauge and an instinct that something was off, so yes. Marsh stood up slowly. He looked at the documentation on Ray's phone. Ray had transferred the photos to his laptop and printed them the night before, which was probably overkill but felt right. And he went through each page carefully. The younger engineers leaned over his shoulders, and there was a quiet, tense conversation in technical shorthand that Ray mostly followed and occasionally didn't. Finally, Marsh looked up. Your secondary corrections, he said. The headrest and the footrests. Walk me through those. Ray walked him through them. He was precise and unapologetic. He cited his measurements, explained his reasoning, showed his reference sources. He wasn't performing confidence. He just knew what he'd done and why he'd done it, and he laid it out plainly. When he finished, Marsh was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Calloway, he said, where did you train? I didn't. Not in mobility equipment. I've worked on 2 chairs before, both basic manual systems. Beyond that, it's general mechanical knowledge and research. You found 4 separate calibration and alignment errors that my team, and her physical therapist, and her physician, collectively missed over 14 months. To be fair to your team, 3 of the 4 were caused by the original tilt error. Once the body compensates for a major imbalance, secondary adjustments get made to accommodate the compensation, and those adjustments seem correct in isolation. It's a cascade. Ray paused. If you'd identified the tilt early, the others might never have developed. Marsh looked at him with an expression Ray found difficult to read. You're explaining to me why we missed it. I'm explaining why it's a hard thing to catch, Ray said. I'm not in the business of making your team look bad. I'm in the business of a girl being able to sit in her chair without hurting. One of the younger engineers made a small sound, not quite a laugh, something more like the involuntary noise a person makes when they hear something unexpectedly direct. Marsh put the printed documentation down on Ray's workbench. I'd like to revalidate every adjustment before we return the chair to Mia, he said. With your involvement, if you're willing. And I want to document this failure mode so it can be flagged in our calibration protocol going forward. I'm willing, Ray said. They worked for 2 hours. It was, Ray thought,
one of the stranger mornings of his life. 3 credentialed mobility engineers and a car mechanic, standing around a wheelchair in a garage that smelled like motor oil, going through every component together with the careful attention of a surgical team. They found one more thing, a minor wheel alignment that Ray had corrected, but that Marsh wanted to refine further. And they argued about it briefly and productively, in the way that people who both care about getting it right can argue. And they landed on a solution that was better than either of their starting positions. By 10 o'clock, they were done. Marsh signed off on the documentation. He stood in the middle of the garage for a moment, with his hands in his pockets, and he looked at Ray with the expression of a man who was still working through something. "I've been building adaptive mobility systems for 22 years, he said. "I'm going to go home and think about this for a long time." "I hope it's useful," Ray said. "It will be." He extended his hand again. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway, for what you did, and for how you handled this." They shook hands. The engineers left. Ray stood alone in his garage. He expected to feel relieved. He mostly felt hungry, because he'd forgotten to eat breakfast, and also strangely flat in the way that follows a period of extreme focus when the focus suddenly has nothing left to focus on. He ate a granola bar from the drawer in his desk and called Karen to check on Sophie, and then sat down with his morning's first real cup of coffee and tried to figure out what was supposed to happen next. His phone rang at 11:47. He didn't recognize the number. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then he answered it. "Mr. Calloway." It was the assistant from the morning before, the flat, rehearsed voice. "Mr. Voss would like to meet with you, today if possible. He's available at 2 o'clock. Ray looked at the Chevy pickup he still hadn't finished. "Where?" "He'll come to you, if that works." Ray thought about that. A billionaire offering to come to a failing garage in rural Virginia for a 2 o'clock meeting. Whatever this conversation was going to be, it wasn't routine. 2 o'clock is fine, he said. Voss arrived at 1:58 in a single car this time, just the driver and the assistant. The convoy was gone. He got out and walked into the garage, and Ray offered him a folding chair, which Voss accepted without comment, and sat in without any indication of finding it inadequate. "Marsh called me this morning," Voss said. "I figured he would." He used the word exceptional. Elliot Marsh does not use that word about other people. He barely uses it about his own work. Ray said nothing. "He also said you spent 2 minutes explaining to him why his team's mistake was understandable," Voss continued. "He found that—" He paused. "He said it was generous, but I suspect the actual word he used was something stronger." "I wasn't being generous," Ray said. "It was a hard thing to catch. That's just true." Voss looked at him steadily. "You do that a lot? Tell people the truth, whether it benefits you or not?" "I try to. Doesn't that cause problems for you?" "Constantly," Ray said. Voss almost smiled. It happened fast, like a light flickering on and then immediately off, but it was there. He looked around the garage, really looked this time, not the quick territorial assessment from before, but the look of someone who was actually trying to understand a place. "Tell me about the business," he said. Ray leaned back against the workbench. "What do you want to know?" "Revenue, year over year, what's declining and what isn't." "That's a specific question." "I'm a specific person." Ray thought about declining. He thought about how much he didn't like the feeling of being assessed, of laying out his shortcomings in front of someone whose shortcomings were all safely hidden behind the kind of money that made shortcomings irrelevant. But something in the directness of Voss's question, there was no condescension in it, no pity, made him answer honestly. "Revenue's down about 30% from where we were 5 years ago,"
he said. Oil changes and basic maintenance are mostly gone to the chains. I make the majority of my money on diagnostics and repair work on older vehicles, stuff the chains can't or won't handle. That market is stable, but it's not growing. My overhead is manageable. I'm not going under tomorrow, but I'm also not going anywhere. What would it take to grow? A lift replacement, Ray said, without having to think about it. The one I've got is 30 years old, and it limits what I can safely work on. Better diagnostic software. I can't service anything newer than about 2019 efficiently without it. And some way of letting people know I exist that doesn't involve word of mouth from people who are slowly getting too old to drive. Voss nodded like he was filing something. The mobility equipment work. Last night, this morning. Have you done anything like that commercially? No. 2 chairs total. Both personal favors for people who couldn't afford the specialist rates. You found errors that certified specialists missed? I found one error. The cascade followed from that. Stop being modest, Voss said, and his voice had an edge now. Not unkind, but firm. The voice of a man who negotiated for a living and recognized deflection as a form of negotiation. You found what needed to be found. Own that. Ray held his gaze. All right, yes. I found what needed to be found. Okay. Voss leaned forward, elbows on knees. Here's what I want to say to you, and I want you to hear it as a statement of fact, not as a gesture. He paused to make sure Ray was actually listening. You changed my daughter's life last night. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. Mia has been in pain every single day for over a year. She stopped telling me about it 3 months ago because she didn't want me to spend more money on more specialists who were going to tell her the same thing. She wrote that note and put it in the cushion because she needed to tell someone, even if no one ever found it. He stopped. His jaw moved slightly, the way a person's jaw moves when they're keeping something in. She is 17 years old, and she had given up on anyone actually helping her. Ray didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I have resources, Voss continued, more than I can use intelligently on my own. I spend a lot of money on a lot of things, some of which matter and some of which don't. Last night, one man with a wrench and an angle gauge and the willingness to stay up all night did more for my daughter than 2 years of specialists and 6 figures of equipment costs. He looked at Ray directly. I want to do something about that. Not just for Mia, for the people who don't have what Mia has, who are sitting in chairs or lying in beds with problems that the expensive system missed, who can't afford to keep trying, who have given up. The garage was very quiet. Ray could hear the compressor in the corner running its cycle. He could hear a car pass on the road outside. What are you proposing? He said. A partnership. Voss said it plainly, without decorating it. I fund the equipment and the facility upgrades you need. You continue your auto work, because that's clearly what this community needs, and it's clearly what you're good at. But we add a component, a service for mobility equipment assessment, sliding scale fees, free for people who can't pay. We bring in a certified specialist to oversee the clinical side, but the mechanical assessment, the actual problem finding, runs through you. He let that sit for a moment. Marsh wants to partner with us on developing a new calibration verification protocol. He wants to put your angle check methodology into their standard delivery process. That conversation will happen regardless of what you decide here, but I'd rather it happen as part of something larger. Ray was quiet. He was quiet for long enough that Voss didn't try to fill the silence, which told Ray something about the man, that he was comfortable waiting, that he'd made his offer and wasn't going to talk on top of it. Why me? Ray said finally.
You could fund a whole clinic. Hire actual specialists. I've been funding actual specialists for 2 years, Voss said. They missed what you found. That's one data point. Marsh described your diagnostic process this morning as more systematic and thorough than the standard assessment protocol his own team uses. Voss paused. That's one data point from a man who has 22 years of them. Ray stood up and walked to the garage door and looked out at the parking lot. The cracked asphalt. The sign with the missing letter. The place his grandfather had built and his father had run, and that he had been quietly failing to save for the last 5 years. He thought about Sophie doing homework on the waiting room couch. He thought about macaroni and cheese nights. He thought about a folded piece of paper with 4 words on it, and the way Mia had said, 14 months, not with anger, just with the quiet, flat clarity of someone finally putting a number on something they'd been carrying for a long time. He turned back. I have a condition, he said. Voss didn't react, just waited. The people who come here for the mobility assessment, I want them treated exactly the same whether they're paying or not. No different intake process, no different quality of attention. I've been to enough places that have one door for the people who can afford things and another door for the people who can't, and I won't run that kind of place. Agreed, Voss said, without any pause. And I want full operational say over the mechanical work. Not a committee, not a board. You fund it, but you don't overrule me on how the work gets done. Voss considered that for 2 seconds. Within reason. Within my reason, Ray said. This is my garage. These are my hands. I'll listen to advice, but I won't have anyone's name on a form overriding what I find with my own instruments. A pause. Agreed, Voss said again. Ray nodded slowly. He was still processing it. The whole thing felt large and improbable, in the way that occasionally things in real life outpaced what you'd imagined possible for yourself. I want to talk to Mia, Ray said. Voss looked slightly surprised. To Mia? You're telling me she gave up 3 months ago, Ray said. That she stopped telling you about the pain because she didn't want to try anymore. I want to make sure she knows this isn't about her father's money deciding to solve a problem. I want her to hear about this directly. He paused. Is that all right with you? Voss looked at him for a long moment. There was something in his expression that Ray couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe, but also something more personal, like the question had touched something. Yes, Voss said quietly. That's all right with me. Then let's talk details, Ray said. And then I need to go pick up my daughter from school, because she's going to want to know why I sound different today, and I want to have the right words ready. Voss reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder. I had my team put together a preliminary structure this morning. Ray pulled the other folding chair over and sat down. They talked for 2 hours. At 4:15, Ray Calloway drove to Sophie's school and waited in the pickup line with the other parents. And when Sophie climbed in with her backpack half open and her ponytail sideways, and a drawing she'd done in art class that she wanted him to see immediately, he looked at the drawing and told her it was the best horse he'd ever seen. It was clearly supposed to be a dog, but he'd learned years ago that the interpretation question was a minefield. And she laughed and corrected him, and then asked why he looked different. I don't look different, he said. You do, she said. You look like the end of a movie. He glanced in the rear-view mirror at her. What does that mean? Like something happened, she said simply. Something big. He drove for a moment. Something did, he said. Good something or bad something? He thought about what he'd said to Mia that morning, about the kinds of things that were both at once, and how good hard was mostly good. Good something, he said. Really good something. She seemed satisfied with that. She went back to her drawing, explaining to him in great detail what each part of the horse dog was supposed to represent. And he listened and drove and felt the particular, fragile, enormous sensation of a life about to change. 3 days passed before Ray met Mia again. In those 3 days, a contractor came out to assess the garage, sent by Voss's office, quiet and professional, measuring everything with the efficiency of someone who did this regularly and had learned not to editorialize. A lawyer called with paperwork. Marsh emailed twice with follow-up questions about the calibration methodology, questions so specific and technically demanding that Ray spent an hour each time making sure his answers were accurate before he sent them back. His regular customers came and went. Tom Briggs brought in his F-150 for a brake job. The Hendersons needed a new alternator on their minivan. And Ray worked those jobs the same way he always had, which was carefully and without drama. But something underneath the ordinary surface of those days was humming at a different frequency than before. Sophie noticed. She kept watching him at dinner with the focused, slightly suspicious attention of a child who has learned that adults behave strangely when they're keeping good news. "You're going to tell me something," she said on the second night, pointing her fork at him. "I tell you things every night," Ray said. "Something big." "Eat your dinner." "Dad!" "Sophie." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, which for a 9-year-old was a remarkable act of sustained will. Then she went back to her pasta, and Ray thought he'd gotten away with it. And then she said, "Is it about money?" He looked at her. "Why would it be about money?" "Because you've been checking the mail twice a day, and you don't do that unless it's about money or something scary. And you don't look scared." Ray put down his fork. He had a moment of profound, slightly uncomfortable awareness that his daughter had been paying closer attention to the texture of his anxieties than he'd realized. "I'm working on something," he said. "Something that might change things around here. Good change. But I don't want to say too much until it's real." "How close to real?" "Close." She seemed to accept that. She twirled pasta around her fork with great concentration. "Is it because of the wheelchair girl?" He stared at her. "How do you know about that?" "Aunt Karen told me about the phone call." She shrugged, the particular shrug of someone who is very much not shrugging casually. "She said you sounded like you'd either done something great or something catastrophic, and she couldn't tell which." "Karen talks too much," Ray said. "She says that about you," Sophie replied. He laughed. A real one, the kind that comes out before you've decided to laugh. And Sophie grinned at him across the table, satisfied, and went back to her dinner. And Ray sat there for a moment, thinking about how clearly that kid saw him, how completely and unself-consciously she paid attention to him. And he felt the familiar mix of gratitude and responsibility that came with being someone's whole world. He would do right by this. He would make sure of it. On the third morning, Voss's assistant called and asked if Ray was available that afternoon. Mia would be with him. Ray said yes and spent the morning finishing the Chevy pickup and cleaning the garage more thoroughly than he usually bothered with. Not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because he wanted the space to feel like what it actually was, a place where real work happened. They arrived at 1:30. This time it was just the one car, and Voss got out first, and then Mia came around the side of the vehicle in her chair, moving with the easy control of someone who had been operating it for over a year and knew exactly how it handled. She was in different clothes, less formal, more like someone who'd decided she wasn't performing for anyone today. And she looked, Ray thought, different in a way that was hard to quantify. Not dramatically different, but in the small ways that matter. The set of her shoulders, something around her eyes. Less braced, like a person who had stopped waiting for the next thing to hurt. "You cleaned up," she said, looking at the garage. "Little bit," Ray said. "The sign still has a missing letter." "That's a different budget line." She almost smiled. It was becoming, Ray was noticing, a reliable almost. the smile that got most of the way there before some trained caution pulled it back. He thought with enough time, it would stop pulling back. He thought she was working on that. Voss stayed near the car. He'd learned, apparently, to give his daughter room to operate on her own terms. Ray suspected that had been a lesson with some difficulty in it for a man accustomed to managing every room he entered. "Dad says you want to talk to me," Mia said. "I do." "About the plan?" "Yes." "He already told me about it," she said. "The funding, the mobility assessment service, the partnership with Marcia's team?" She watched Ray carefully. "I told him it sounded like he was trying to buy his way out of guilt." Ray blinked. "What did he say?" "He said I wasn't wrong, but that it didn't mean the idea was bad." "He's right," Ray said. "Both of those things can be true at the same time." She looked at him steadily. "So which part did you want to tell me yourself?" Ray leaned against the doorframe. He'd thought about how to say this, and decided that the only way to say it was plainly. The same way she spoke, directly, without softening the edges into something easier to handle. "I wanted you to know that this isn't happening because your father has money and felt bad," he said. "It's happening because you put a note in a cushion when you'd run out of other options. You did that. You kept asking, even when asking had stopped working. And I think that matters, and I think you should know it matters." She was quiet. "You asked me the other day why I didn't just go home," Ray said. "Fix the noise and leave. And I told you about my daughter and teachers who notice things. That was true. But the other true thing is that I found that note, and I read it, and it said, 'Someone please help.' And I couldn't—" He stopped, chose the next word carefully. "I couldn't unknow that. So I did something about it." Mia looked at her hands on the armrests. "I wrote 6 of those notes," she said. "Different versions, over about 4 months." She said it like she was confessing something that she hadn't quite decided she was ready to confess. "I threw away 5 of them. I put the last one in the cushion because I didn't know what else to do with it. I figured maybe some technician would find it someday during a service call and would either help or would think I was pathetic." "Neither," Ray said. "No," she said. "Neither." She looked up. "I want to know one thing." "Ask it." "If you hadn't found the note, if you'd just found the mechanical problem, and there was no note, would you still have fixed it?" Ray thought about that honestly. The real answer, not the comfortable one. "Yes," he said. "The note changed the timeline, made it that night instead of waiting to see if I could get permission to do more. But the problem was there, and I'd found it. I wouldn't have been able to leave it." He paused. "The note just took away any doubt I had about whether it was worth the risk." She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" he asked. "Okay, I believe you," she said. Like that settled something. Voss chose that moment to walk over, with the careful timing of a man who'd been watching from a distance and had decided the moment had arrived. He looked at Mia with a question in his eyes, and she looked back at him in the quiet language that passes between parents and children who have weathered difficult things together. "It's good," she said. Voss exhaled, just slightly. "Good." They sat together in the garage then, Ray on the step, Mia in her chair, Voss on the folding chair that was apparently his now. And they talked for 3 hours. Not about paperwork or funding structures or calibration protocols, about what it was supposed to actually look like. What the room should feel like when someone rolled in. How you made a person feel heard before you touched their equipment. What to do when you found a problem that the expensive clinic had missed, and the person in front of you was trying to decide whether to be relieved or furious. Mia had opinions about all of it. She had, it turned out, opinions about everything. She'd been doing research since the morning in the parking lot, reading about equipment calibration failures, about the gap between clinical assessment and real-world performance, about the number of people in adaptive mobility devices who reported chronic discomfort their providers attributed to their underlying conditions rather than their equipment. She pulled up sources on her phone and read numbers out loud, and was not even slightly hesitant about telling Ray when she thought his instincts were right and when she thought they were incomplete. Ray found that he liked her enormously. Voss watched his daughter talk and said almost nothing for 2 full hours, and once, when Ray glanced over, the man's expression was the most unguarded Ray had ever seen it. Just a father watching his kid be herself. All the power and armor completely set aside for a moment, like a coat hung on a hook at the door. It was Mia who raised the question Ray hadn't yet figured out how to ask. "What about the people who already went through what I went through?" she said. "Not future people. The ones who are already sitting in equipment that's wrong and being told the problem is them." Ray looked at her. "That's what this is trying to address." "No, I know, but how do you find them? They're not going to come to you. Half of them have stopped asking. They've been told so many times that the chair is fine that they believe it." She tapped the armrest. "I believed it. For 14 months, I believed the pain was mine." The garage went quiet. Ray thought about that. He'd been thinking about the operational structure, the lift replacement, the software, the sliding scale fees. He hadn't yet thought as deeply about the part that came before the door. How you reached someone who had already given up on doors. "That's the hard part," he said. "That's the most important part," Mia said. "The people who can still advocate for themselves will find you. It's the ones who can't anymore that you need to think about." Voss looked at his daughter. "She has a point." "I know she has a point," Ray said. "I don't have an answer for it yet." "I do," Mia said. Both men looked at her. She looked slightly self-conscious for the first time all afternoon. A flash of 16 showing through the composure. "Or the beginning of one," she amended. "There are online communities. People who use adaptive equipment, who talk to each other because they stopped trusting the clinical system. They're not hard to find. They just don't trust outsiders." She paused. "They might trust someone like me." Silence. "You'd want to be involved," Voss said, and it came out as half a question and half a statement. And Ray could hear years of complicated parenting in the careful balance of those 5 words. The fear of letting her take on something hard. The knowledge that not letting her would be its own kind of harm. "I'm already involved," Mia said. "The only question is how." Ray looked at Voss. Voss looked at Ray. "She's right," Ray said. Voss pressed his lips together. Then, "Within limits we agree on together." "Obviously," Mia said. "And with people around you who—" "Dad," she said, not unkindly. He stopped. She looked at him directly, and her voice was gentle, but it was clear. "I'm not made of glass," she said. "I never was. I know you think you have to protect me from hard things, but hard things happen to me anyway. They're happening to me right now. And they were happening to me for 14 months while everyone tried to protect me. The difference is, now I know what to do with it." Voss looked at her for a long moment. Ray thought he was going to say something complicated, something fatherly and protective and honest that would take a long time to say. Instead, he just nodded, once, and looked away briefly in the direction of nothing in particular, and swallowed. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you," she said. Ray looked down at his hands. He'd come into this week as a man trying to keep a garage alive. He'd spent 30 hours awake, stood in front of a billionaire with a wrench, defended his work to credentialed experts, negotiated a partnership he still half expected to turn out to be some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. And now he was sitting in that same garage, listening to a 17-year-old girl tell her father she was not made of glass. And he felt the particular, irreversible feeling of a life that had turned a corner it couldn't turn back from. He was glad.
Not the performed gladness of someone counting their blessings. The real, complicated, slightly frightening gladness of a man who had been on the edge of something for a long time, and had finally stepped forward and was now standing in different territory. He had a question of his own. He'd been carrying it for 3 days without knowing quite how to ask it. He looked at Mia. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," she said. The note. 6 drafts over 4 months. He chose the words carefully. That's a long time to keep asking for something and keep not being heard. How do you... He stopped. Started again. How did you keep going? Some people in that situation stop. Not just stop asking, stop everything. It was a real question. He'd asked it because he actually needed to know. Because the people who were going to come through his door, eventually, would include some who had been in that place. And he needed to understand it better than he did. Mia was quiet for a moment. "Sophie," she said. Ray frowned. "My daughter?" "No, I don't mean... I didn't know about Sophie. I mean..." She gathered the thought. "My mom's name was Sophie. She died when I was 11. She said it without dramatic weight, just as a fact she'd made peace with. The way you make peace with the facts that define your life. She used to tell me that the people who stop aren't weaker than the people who keep going. They're just lonelier. They ran out of people who saw them." She paused. "I kept writing those notes because it felt like someone might still see me. Someday. Even if not today." She looked at Ray. "And then you did." The garage was very quiet. Ray didn't say anything because there wasn't anything adequate to say. And he'd learned a long time ago that the impulse to fill silence with words was mostly about your own discomfort and not the other person's need. Voss had gone very still beside him. After a moment, Mia said, more lightly, "Also, I was pretty angry. Anger helps." Ray laughed, and the release of it was enormous. Mia smiled. A real one this time, complete, all the way through. The first one Ray had seen that didn't pull back at the last second. And even Voss made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Anger helps," Ray repeated. "I'll put that in the methodology." "You should," she said. "Right after the angle gauge." They wrapped up at 4:45. Voss shook Ray's hand at the car, and it was different from every other handshake they'd had. Less like a transaction, more like the beginning of something that had decided to trust itself. "Monday," Voss said. "My contractor will start on the lift. The software licensing is already in process. By end of month, you'll have what you need." "I'll be ready," Ray said. "I know you will." Voss got into the car. Then he lowered the window. "Calloway." "Yeah?" "The sign." He nodded toward it. "Get the letter fixed." Ray looked at the sign. "Always Auto and Repair," it read. "The C gone for 18 months." "It's on the list," Ray said. "Move it up," Voss said. The car pulled out. Ray stood in his parking lot and looked at the sign for a long time. Then he went inside, found his phone, and called the sign company he'd been putting off calling for a year and a half. They said they could get out by the end of the week. He said that worked. He was locking up when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that resolved, when he looked at it, into Mia's name. She must have had the assistant send it from her personal phone. It said, "I've been talking to some people in a couple of online forums. Told them what happened. 3 people already wrote back,
saying they've been told the same thing I was, that the pain is theirs, not the equipment's. Just so you know what's coming. Ray read it twice. He typed back, "I'll be ready." A minute passed. Then, "I know you will. That's why I told them."
He put his phone in his pocket and stood alone in the quiet of his garage, the one his grandfather had built and his father had run. And he looked at the new lift they were going to put in where the old one stood. And the workbench, with the documentation from 3 days ago, was still neatly stacked. And the empty center of the floor, where a wheelchair had been, and where other wheelchairs would be. And he thought, this is the thing. Not the money. Not the partnership or the contracts or the sign getting fixed. This. 3 people in forums, writing back, saying yes. That's what they told me too. This was the thing. He turned off the lights and went home to his daughter. The first one came on a Tuesday. Ray was under a Dodge Ram doing a transmission inspection when he heard the sound. The quiet hum of a motorized chair on the new ramp that had been installed 2 weeks prior along the side entrance of the garage. He rolled out, wiped his hands, and found a man sitting just inside the door. 60-something, broad-shouldered in the way of someone who had been physically powerful for most of his life, and was still adjusting to the fact that his body had renegotiated the terms. He had a jaw like a fence post, and eyes that had the slightly guarded look Ray was beginning to recognize. The look of someone who had been to enough appointments, heard enough reassurances, and was arriving here with just enough hope left to walk through one more door. His name was Gerald. He'd driven 2 hours from Roanoke. He'd found the forum post, Mia's outreach, 3 weeks prior, and he'd read it 4 times before he called the number. "My chair's been certified 3 times in 2 years, Gerald said, before Ray had even offered him a seat or a coffee. "Every time they tell me it's fine. Every time I go home and it's not fine." He looked at Ray with the flat, exhausted directness of a man who had stopped performing patients. "The VA says it's my back. My back doctor says it's the chair. My chair rep says it's my back. I've been going in circles for so long I can't remember what it felt like not to be in them." "Let me look at it," Ray said. He found the problem in 40 minutes. A pressure mapping issue in the cushion system. The sensors had been calibrated to average population data rather than Gerald's specific body weight distribution, which meant the pressure relief cycling was activating too late and too briefly on his right side. Chronic tissue stress. The kind of thing that didn't show up on a standard assessment because the standard assessment didn't watch the chair through a full day's use. Gerald sat in the adjusted chair. He pressed his back against the support. He shifted his weight. He waited. Then he made a sound that Ray had never heard a 60-year-old former Marine make before. It was small and involuntary, and it was the sound of a person feeling something they'd forgotten was possible. "Lord," Gerald said quietly. "The pressure cycling needed to be recalibrated to your weight and your tissue density," Ray said. "Whoever set it up was working from standard defaults. You're not a standard default." Gerald looked at him. 26 months, he said. "I've been dealing with this for 26 months. I know. I told 5 different people. I know. They all told me, I know," Ray said. And he said it the way you say something when you mean it completely, without any implication that what comes after will fix what came before. Because it wouldn't. 26 months didn't disappear because one Tuesday a mechanic in rural Virginia found the right setting. But Gerald didn't need that pretended away. He just needed to be heard saying it. Gerald nodded slowly. He looked at the garage, the new lift in the corner, the workbench with its organized instruments, the ramp at the side door. He looked at Ray. "How much do I owe you?" he said. "What can you manage?" Ray asked. Gerald looked at him for a long moment.
That's not how it usually works. That's how it works here. Gerald named a number that was less than the cost of Ray's time. Ray said that was fine and wrote up the paperwork that said exactly that. When Gerald left, he paused at the top of the ramp and turned back. "There's a man in my VFW group," he said. "Younger than me. He stopped coming to meetings about 8 months ago. His wife says he doesn't go anywhere anymore." He held Ray's gaze. "Can I give him this number?" "Please," Ray said. Gerald nodded once. He went down the ramp and drove away. And Ray stood in the door and watched him go, and felt the weight of what 26 months of being told you're wrong does to a person, and the corresponding, fragile, important weight of one afternoon that says otherwise. He went back to the Dodge Ram. He had 3 more appointments that week. By the end of the first month, he had 17. By the end of the second, 32. They came from Roanoke and Richmond and as far away as Charlotte, driving or being driven by family members who had heard about the forum posts, or the word of mouth that had started moving through communities Ray hadn't even known existed. Networks of caregivers and patients and family members who talked to each other across state lines, because the formal system had taught them that the only people who really understood their situation were other people in it. The certified specialist Voss had brought in was a woman named Dr. Patricia Owens, 50s, direct. The kind of professional who had clearly spent enough years fighting with insurance companies and institutional inertia that she had developed a very low tolerance for both incompetence and pretension. She and Ray established a working rhythm that surprised them both. She handled the clinical assessments and the documentation. He handled the mechanical diagnostics, and they argued productively about the overlap and always landed somewhere better than either of their starting points. "You know what I like about working here?" she said to him one afternoon, about 6 weeks in. Ray looked up from the chair he was measuring. "The ambiance?" "People actually get better," she said. "In most of the places I've worked, the metric for success is that no one complains. Here, the metric is that something actually changes." She paused. "It's different. I forgot it could feel like that." Mia came by on a Saturday in the 7th week. She hadn't announced herself, just pulled up in the car that had started appearing without the convoy of SUVs around it, with a driver who waited quietly and didn't try to come inside. She rolled up the ramp and into the garage, and looked around at everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. "The letter's fixed," she said, looking at the sign. "Couple weeks ago," Ray said. "Calloway's," she said. "Looks right." "Felt weird for a while," he admitted. "Like it was someone else's sign." She looked at him. "Is it yours now?" He thought about that honestly. "More than it was," he said. She rolled past him to the workbench, looked at the intake forms stacked there, the photographs, the before and after measurement sheets. She picked up the top one and read it and put it down. 38 people, Ray said. "So far." "I know. I've been following it." She turned to look at him. 11 of them found us through the forum work. The rest through word of mouth. "Your work," Ray corrected. "The forum work was yours." She looked slightly uncomfortable with that, the way people do when credit is assigned to something they did out of necessity rather than strategy. "I just told my story," she said. "That's all it ever takes," Ray said. "When someone tells their story plainly and other people recognize themselves in it. That's the whole mechanism." She was quiet for a moment, rolling slowly back and forth a few inches, the way people sometimes do when they're thinking. "One of the women who reached out to me last week, her name is Diane. She's 44. She hasn't been outside her house in 3 months. Not because she physically can't, because her chair causes her enough pain that she's decided it's not worth it." Mia stopped rolling. "She lives 40 minutes from here." "Call her," Ray said. "I already did. She's coming Thursday." He looked at her. She looked back at him. There was something between them by now that had developed in the way of things that develop without anyone deciding to build them, just through the accumulation of conversations and honest exchanges, and the experience of working on something real together. Not friendship exactly, because the distance between 17 and 44 was real, and he didn't pretend it wasn't. Something more like mutual recognition, the acknowledgement of two people who had both, in their different ways, learned that caring enough to be wrong about something was better than the safety of not trying. "You doing okay?" he asked. "You personally, not the project." She considered the question without deflecting it. "Better," she said. "My physical therapist says the postural compensation from the tilt is unwinding. It's a process. Some days are harder than others." A pause. "I started a journal, writing things down." "Good things or hard things?" "Both. Mostly both at the same time." She looked at him sideways. "Like somebody once told me was possible." He nodded. "How's your father?" Something moved across her face. Complicated, layered, the kind of expression that belongs to people navigating relationships with a lot of history in them. "He's trying," she said. "He comes to the Thursday sessions. He sits in the car and works on his laptop and pretends he's not watching. But he's watching." A pause. "He bought him and me tickets to a Nationals game next month. Neither of us likes baseball." Ray laughed. "It was a gesture," she said, but she was almost smiling. "They usually are," he said. Voss himself arrived an hour later, the way he'd taken to doing on Saturdays. Not announced, not demanding attention, just present. He'd started sitting in on some of the client's sessions, not to observe the mechanical work, but to understand what the human part of it looked like. He was quiet in those sessions, in a way that had taken him visible effort to learn. Ray had watched him learn it in real time. The impulse to solve things being slowly overridden by the discipline of listening first. He was a fast learner when he decided to be. Ray gave him that. "Diane Mercer confirmed for Thursday," Mia told him as he came in. "I saw," Voss said. He looked at Ray. "Her insurance situation is complicated. Patricia flagged it." "I know. We'll work around it." Voss nodded. He didn't offer to throw money at the complication. He'd learned that too, that there were some things money solved and some things it didn't, and that the discipline of telling the difference was important here. He and Ray had argued about it twice, productively, and landed in the same place both times. The resources were in service of the work, not the other way around. "I want to talk to you about something," Voss said, "when you have a moment." Ray finished documenting the morning's last case and walked outside with Voss into the afternoon. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The parking lot was full. 3 cars from clients, Patricia's sensible sedan, Mia's vehicle. Calloway's auto and repair looked different from the outside than it had 3 months ago. The ramp was new. The lighting was fixed. The parking spaces had been relined. The sign was complete. It still wasn't a beautiful building. It wasn't supposed to be. "I had a meeting last week," Voss said. 2 hospital systems and a rehabilitation network. They've been following what we're doing here. Ray looked at him. "Following it how?" "The data we've been submitting. The calibration error documentation, the outcome reports. Patricia's been submitting them to a research repository, and someone was paying attention." Voss paused. "They want to talk about a formal protocol, standardizing what you and Marsh developed, building it into equipment delivery and follow-up assessment across multiple systems." Ray was quiet for a moment. "That's big," he said. "Yes. That's not a garage in Virginia anymore." No, Voss said. It isn't. He looked at Ray steadily. I want to know if you want that. Not if it's a good idea in the abstract. If you want it. Because it changes things. It changes what this place is, and what your role in it is, and how much of your time it takes. Ray looked at the garage. He thought about his grandfather, who had opened it with a handshake and a used lift, and the conviction that honest work was its own argument. He thought about his father, who had run it through 2 recessions and 1 divorce, and never once considered that it might not be worth keeping. He thought about the years he'd spent trying to hold that legacy together with not quite enough of everything, and the one night he'd stayed up and taken apart a wheelchair because he couldn't leave something wrong alone. I have a condition, he said. Voss smiled slightly. You always do. This place stays the same, Ray said. Whatever else happens, whatever protocols, whatever hospital partnerships, whatever gets built on top of this garage stays exactly what it is. People bring their cars here. People bring their chairs here. Tom Briggs gets his brakes done. Gerald drives 2 hours from Roanoke and gets asked what he can manage. That doesn't get rebranded or scaled or turned into something with a logo and a mission statement. Agreed, Voss said. The bigger thing can have its logos, Ray said. This place just stays a garage. Voss looked at him for a long moment. You know, when I came here that first morning, I had about 45 seconds of considering whether to have someone simply... He stopped. Make the problem go away? Ray said. Yes. I know, Ray said. I could tell. What stopped me, Voss said slowly, like he was working it out as he said it, was Mia's face when she looked at you. In the parking lot, before anyone said anything. She was looking at you the way she used to look at things before she got tired. He paused. I hadn't seen her look at anything like that in a long time. Ray didn't say anything. I want you to know, Voss said, and his voice had dropped to the register it went to when he was saying something true without armor around it. That whatever this becomes, the protocols, the hospitals, the whatever, it doesn't matter to me the way that morning mattered. In my whole career, with everything I've built, I have never felt... He stopped, looked away briefly. I should have heard her, he said. I should have been the one who heard her. You were trying, Ray said. I was paying people to try, Voss said. That's different. Ray didn't argue with that, because it was true, and they both knew it, and the truth of it wasn't an accusation, just an accounting. The kind of accounting a person does when they're serious about not making the same error twice. She doesn't need you to have been perfect, Ray said. She needs you to be present now, and you are. He paused. That matters. Don't discount it. Voss nodded. He took a breath and let it out, and put his hands in his pockets and looked at the sign. Calloway's, he said. That's what it says. It's a good name for a place like this. They went back inside. Diane Mercer came on Thursday. She was 44, and she had the particular quality of stillness that develops in people who've been in pain long enough that moving has become something they budget carefully, like money running low, spent only when necessary, saved whenever possible. Her daughter had driven her. Her daughter was 22 and had the tight-shouldered protectiveness of a young person who had watched someone they loved diminish gradually and had concluded somewhere along the way that the job of defending her mother had fallen to her. They came in, and Ray offered them coffee, and Patricia did the intake, and Ray sat across from Diane and just asked her to tell him about it. Not the medical history, not the list of assessments, just what it felt like, day to day. What it had been like before 3 months ago, and what 3 months ago had changed. She talked for 20 minutes. Her daughter held her hand for the first 5, and then let go. because Diane didn't need to be held up to talk. She'd been holding the story for 3 months, and it had its own structure, its own weight, and what she needed was just someone to set it down in front of. When she finished, Ray asked 3 specific questions about the chair, and then went to work. It took him an hour and 40 minutes. 2 separate issues. A footrest that had been adjusted for standing transfers without being readjusted for seated positioning, creating a chronic hip flexor strain on the left side, and a headrest that had been removed and reattached after a repair 8 months ago and had been reattached at 1 centimeter off its original position, just enough to change her neck posture for every hour she spent in the chair. 1 centimeter. He thought about that. 1 centimeter, maintained for 8 months, hours a day. He thought about all the appointments where someone had looked at the chart and looked at her and looked at the chair in its recorded configuration and said the configuration was fine. He fixed it. He had Diane try it. She sat in it and tipped her head back against the headrest, which now sat where it was supposed to sit, and she closed her eyes. Her daughter, across the garage, put her hand over her mouth. "Mama?" she said. "Just give me a minute," Diane said, and her voice was very quiet. She sat with her eyes closed and her head properly supported for the first time in 8 months. And Ray stood back and didn't say anything and let her have every second of that minute. When she opened her eyes, she looked at Ray the way people look at someone they're not sure they can trust yet with how much this means to them. "What do I owe you?" she said. "What can you manage?" Ray said. She looked at him. "Somebody told me you'd say that." "Who told you?" "A girl on the internet," she said. "Young. Said she found a garage in Virginia run by a man who asks what you can manage." She looked around the space. She said, and I wrote it down because it was an odd thing to say about a car mechanic. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, found a note, read from it. "He listens like your problem is the only problem in the world, and then he fixes it like he's been waiting his whole life to find exactly that problem." She put her phone down. "That's a strange thing to write about someone." "That's Mia," Ray said. She didn't say her name. "She wouldn't," Ray said. "That sounds right." Diane's daughter came across the garage and stood beside her mother's chair and looked at Ray with the eyes of someone who has been keeping vigil for a long time and is not quite ready to stand down. "Is it going to stay fixed?" she asked. The question had years in it. "Bring her back in a month," Ray said. "I want to check how the adjustment is settling and whether we need to refine anything. After that, every 3 months for the first year. And if anything changes, anything at all, you call me directly." He wrote his number on a card. "Not the intake line, mine." The daughter took the card. She read it. She looked up. "Why?" she said. "Why do you do it this way?" It was a genuine question, not a challenge. The question of someone who had been through enough systems, enough offices, enough professionals doing the required minimum, that genuinely trying was something that needed explaining. Ray thought about how to answer it. "My grandfather opened this garage in 1959, he said. He didn't have much. He had good hands and a clean reputation and the belief that if someone brought you their problem, you treated it like it mattered, because to them, it did." He looked at Diane, then at her daughter. "I spent a lot of years in this garage trying to keep it alive, and I'll be honest with you. There were times I wasn't sure it deserved to survive. Whether what it was still worth what it cost." He stopped. "Then one night somebody brought me a chair with a problem that wasn't supposed to be there, and I stayed up all night fixing it. And the next morning, I understood something I should have already known." He paused. "The things worth doing are the ones where someone needed doing and nobody else was doing them. That's it. That's the whole reason." The daughter nodded slowly. Her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she said.
And she meant it for everything. For the chair, for the number on the card, for the answer, for all of it together. "You're welcome," Ray said. They left. The garage got quiet. Patricia finished her notes. Ray washed his hands at the utility sink and stood there for a moment with the water running. He thought about Diane sitting with her eyes closed. He thought about Gerald saying "Lord" in that quiet, surprised voice. He thought about Mia saying, "I forgot what it feels like not to hurt." He thought about a folded piece of paper with 4 words on it that a girl had written at the end of everything she had left. He thought about his father working these same floors. His grandfather before that. He turned off the water. Mia texted him that evening. It was becoming a habit, a message at the end of particularly significant days, brief and precise, because that was how she communicated when something mattered to her most. How was Diane? He thought about how to answer that. "Good," he wrote back. "Really good." A pause. Then, "She posted in the forum an hour ago. Said to tell anyone who's been putting it off to stop putting it off." Ray smiled. "What did you say?" "I said I'd pass it along." Another pause. "I think she's going to be okay." "Yeah," Ray wrote. "I think so too." He locked up the garage, the sign above him reading Calloway's in full, all the letters intact. And he drove home through the early dark of a Virginia evening. Sophie was at Karen's for dinner. The house was quiet when he got there, and he went to the kitchen and made himself something to eat, and sat at the table where Sophie had pointed her fork at him and said, "You look like the end of a movie." He ate slowly and thought about what his grandfather would make of a partnership with a billionaire, and hospital systems, and online forums reaching people in states he'd never driven through. He thought the old man would probably have had a lot of questions about the specifics, and very few about the principle. The principle was the same as it had always been. Someone brings you their problem. You treat it like it matters. You measure what you can measure. You stay up all night when staying up all night is what's required. You fix what's fixable. You tell the truth, even when the truth complicates things. You don't leave something wrong alone. Sophie came home at 8:30 with a drawing she'd done at Aunt Karen's. A figure in a wheelchair, next to a taller figure, with what was clearly supposed to be a wrench, surrounded by what were either stars or some kind of abstract decorative element that Sophie explained were meant to be the good things happening. Ray looked at it for a long time. "This is for the garage," Sophie said, "for the wall, so people know what it's for." He looked at his daughter, 9 years old, fierce, paying attention to the world with both eyes open and an enormous and uncomplicated faith that things could be better than they were if someone decided to make them better. "I'll put it up Monday," he said. She looked at him with that particular focus she'd had her whole life. "Are you happy, Dad?" He thought about it the way she deserved, honestly, completely. "Yeah, baby," he said. "I really am." She nodded, satisfied, already moving on to the next thing, the way children do when an adult confirms what they already knew. He taped the drawing to his clipboard that night so he wouldn't forget to bring it Monday. A man with a wrench and a person in a wheelchair, and the good things happening all around them, rendered in crayon by a 9-year-old who had been watching her father carry something for a long time, and was glad to see him finally set it down in the right place. The thing about real change, the kind that sticks, the kind that matters, is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a soundtrack or a ribbon cutting or a moment where the light falls just right. It arrives the way it arrived for Ray Calloway, in the middle of an ordinary night, when a man who was too tired to be heroic, but too honest to look away, picked up a wrench and decided that something being wrong was reason enough to fix it. Not because someone was watching, not because someone would pay him for it,
Not because the odds were good, or the risk was low, or the outcome was guaranteed. Because a girl had written someone, "Please help," and hidden it somewhere a person might find it. And he had been the person who found it. And that was enough. That was always going to be enough. Some things in this world don't require a grand explanation. They only require that one person, tired, uncertain, standing in a half-broken garage in the middle of the night, cares enough to stay. Ray Calloway stayed. And because he did, 38 people woke up the next morning in less pain than they'd been in the day before. And 3 of them left their houses for the first time in months. And 1 of them posted in a forum that changed someone else's mind about making the call they'd been putting off. And a 17-year-old girl, who had spent 14 months being told the pain was hers, sat in her chair with straight posture and open eyes and started planning what she was going to build next. And in a garage in rural Virginia, with a sign that finally had all its letters, and a new lift in the corner, and a child's drawing taped to the clipboard, the work continued, the same as it had always been, and completely different from what it used to be. One person, one problem, one honest pair of hands at a time.